Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. We are living in exciting times where incredible coffee can be had for super cheap. And not just that, but we have more than one option. To get really great coffee, you are spending at least $300 on something that you would be happy with. But recently, we were able to start getting that at $100 with the Espresso Q2 heptagonal. And then after that, with the Kingrinder K6 at $100. And now, even more recently, we have loads of options under that $100 barrier. We have the Espresso Q Air, which now comes in around $70. And we have the Kingrinder P2, which comes in around $50 US. Really excited about, because I've never really gotten to do a head-to-head with things this cheap and accessibly priced while still having supreme cup quality. We're going to go over the build quality of each, so we're going to take them apart, look at how they're built. We're going to talk about the burr geometries, and we will talk about the impacts on the cup. Now, I've also included the Q2, the original one here, which is still available at $109, only for the sake of comparison to see what you're missing out on when you go down to the cheaper price. We'll also brew coffee afterwards, doing a little head-to-head type of brew, and we'll talk about the flavor attributes. I see on their website they have a Q Air and a Q Air S or a QS Air. I'm not sure what the difference is there. It's not very clear there, but this one, the body weighs 273 grams. With the handle, it's 362.4, which I guess that means this is the Q Air S. The P2 from Kingrinder is 250 grams, and then with the handle, it is 325. So we have about a 40 gram difference between the two, with the Kingrinder being slightly lighter. Just so we have a comparison to the Q2 heptagonal, this weighs 433, without the handle, 338. On the Espresso, they actually now, I believe, come with the adjustable handles. Mine came with this, of course, and the reason for that is to differentiate from the bent crank. There is notoriously a company out there that claims they have the ownership over this idea of having a bend in the crank, which is obviously an attempt to help with ergonomics so that as you're going around, your thumb doesn't really get in the way. It seems like Kingrinder has gone away from a potential lawsuit and they went with a straight crank, which is not the worst thing in the world, but like as you're going around, it can be a little easier if there's a dip there. Other than that, very similar size kind of spheres on the end made of wood, so good quality there. We get with the Q Air. Pull off this catch cup, which is fully plastic. I mean, this thing is super, super light. It weighs 31 grams. And then what we have next is kind of the workhorse of this grinder, and this is the very important part to understand. Hey, from the future, this is Lance Hedrick, and I'm asking you that before we get to this cool blind tasting, and we have a little something to say about that in general, but that you would take a moment and hit the like and subscribe, because it really helps the channel, really helps you, obviously, improve your coffee. If you don't do it, you're a square. And in this space, we have no rooms for Squarespace, which is the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace is a wonderful online asset where you can set up through your company, your entrepreneurial spirit, whatever you've done that makes you want to showcase your talents with the world, you can set up a website here. You can set up a shop in order to transact some of the deals of things that you're making, you're selling. Maybe you make shirts that say Superman. Many designs to pick from. You can go bing, bang, boom. Guess what? Cha-ching, we're making money just like that. What's really cool is in the same way I'm chatting with you here, you can chat with your customers there. You can create a community, you can do blogs, you can do anything that's interactive. Absolutely fantastic. Now let me wash down that coffee bean with this sip, because I'm super excited to tell you that we have a link today. That's www.squarespace.com/Lance Hedrick. Make sure you spell that name correctly or just click on the link below and you'll get 10% off your first purchase there. Whenever you want to set up your site, you get 10% off that bad boy. Thank you so much, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. And thanks to you all who decided you don't want to be squares in my space. Let's get back to the review because lots of good stuff to talk about. This was the winning cup. You just don't know what it is yet. You twist off counterclockwise, holding this metal band, and this is the body. So our body right here is just plastic. That's all it is. It weighs 25 grams. It weighs less than the catch cup because there's a thick base on the catch cup. No part of this experiences stress unless you drop it. All right, so this should last in perpetuity, unless, you light it on fire or you drop it. All of the stress is going on between these pieces right here. And this is the beauty of the Q series from Espresso. So what we have here is a full aluminum body with stainless steel. We have a stainless steel rod, we have stainless steel burrs, and then right out here is aluminum holding it together. What we can do is take a look at what this is like. We have internal clicks. Every click gives you about 25 microns of burr movement, I believe is what it is. It's got more resolution than the P2. Let's just say that. The P2, I believe, is 33 microns. This is, which are both more than the Comandante, for instance, which is burr gap. So that one's more like 42 or 45 microns per burr movement. So these are more granular because it's based off of burr movement. Okay. So we take off this bottom wing nut. Then we take off this thick plate, which it's important that this is thick because this holds a lot of the transfer from the actual axle to the burr itself, where it's actually creating the torque in order to crack those beans. It's actually 3.55 millimeters, so that's a thick boy right there. So that's good stuff. That's good to see. So we've got the burr right here with a little nub in the bottom, a little hole. So as it's spinning, that's going to have a lot of tension there. So the axle inside is turning it. You need this really thick so that it's not, it could be a little thinner if this was 100% perfect tolerances, but due to the fact it's likely not, and there's going to be a little wiggle, well, there you go. You need to have a really thick plate so it doesn't warp and meld. And then it's turning that burr. Then we have a spring, and then we have the axle right there. So we have a 2-bearing system, one on the top, one on the bottom, which aids in alignment. Now, of course, I like to sing praises on the ZP6 for having a triple bearing alignment. Obviously, the more points of contact along the axle is going to give you a better alignment. We've got a heptagonal burr, which is stainless steel, about 38 millimeters, which is very common. It's something that you see almost identically in a Comandante or in a lot of other grinders. And then we have our typical, outer burr here, which we'll take a look at here in a second. Now next, let's take a look at the P2. This one, the plastic body is directly connected via plastic to the metal interior. So as you see here, there's a screw here, and there's a screw here, which connects the metal interior where the torque is happening to the actual plastic exterior. Got the wing nut off. We're going to take off this plate that transfers the torque, which is a lot thinner than the one on the Q. 2 millimeters, whereas we notice it's 3.5 on the Q Air. We have our burr. I can see that there are 2 bearings here as well, so you have a dual bearing system. It does have a similar setup to this, where you have kind of a rectangle here. This one, however, spans and is connected to the plastic molding on both sides. So it is connected to the plastic as well as the burr on the end. It's connected, you can kind of see here. And then there are 2 little places here that kind of embed it into the wall. There's a little movement, but not able to get the burr removed, etc., but it's all good. When we look at the burr sets, you do see that there is a bit more of an intense cut on the P2, so that means the fins, these pre-breakers, are a little bit longer on the Espresso Q Air. The sides and the finishing teeth are nearly identical. This in-between cuts on the P2 seem to come up maybe slightly higher than on the Q Air, but that is mostly nothing to really worry about, but everything else looks pretty much identical. They are the same size. Everything about them is pretty identical. Then of course we have the wing nut, which honestly I do prefer that there is a bigger area here with these are little stainless steel balls, it seems like, that are going to help gliding through this system, whereas this one has just one, and it may just be a nub. So I guess this one may be nubs as well, though it does have 2 nubs, which allows with easier gliding. But this does look like it's a little roly ball, and this one looks like it's just a nub. On the collar burr, things look pretty similar visually. They look almost identical, with the exception that the finishing teeth are maybe a bit longer on the Q Air. In cup, you're going to have similar cup experiences, though I have noticed I get a little bit brighter cups, a little bit more clarity out of the Q Air. I get a little bit more body, though they are both giving you a more high clarity brew than other grinders on the market. So for instance, if you're used to a J Max or you're used to like a normal Kinu or something along those lines, those produce more traditional style of experiences when it comes to pour overs. These, which are definitely more pour over focused, are going to be much more brighter across the board. Then when we hyper focus onto these these two specifically, you tend to have a bit more body, a bit more sweetness, but maybe even a bit more bitterness compared to that which the Q Air produces. This is not to say this is going to be bitter compared to your J-Max. Your J-Max is going to have more body, more bitterness than the P2. This is strictly speaking relative to one another. I do go a little bit on the side of the Q Air. I did buy both of these grinders just so people know. The Q Air is typically more expensive, but I did get it on a sale where it was the same price as the P2. And when the prices are identical, it's a no-brainer to me that the Q Air is preferred. But I have noticed that in a lot of markets, the P2 can go for as little as $30 or $40, and the Q Air as high as $80. And in that situation where it's a full 100% markup in price, it's a bit more difficult to really speak if it's worth it, because worth is in the eye of the one with the wallet, right? I'm not even exaggerating. Obviously, for many, that's a very important leap. And so if you're looking just for consistent cup qualities and you don't really mind maybe the fact that the Q Air is likely going to have more longevity, the Q Air will likely have a better particle distribution for those light clean brews, well then it might be worth, staying with the K2. But if you're someone that is willing to save the extra $30, $40 in your specific region of the world, I do think the Q Air is worth it for the majority of people, because it does have a much higher potential long life than, say, the Kingrinder. In addition to that, honestly, the way this is built, you could probably 3D print a number of different outside cases for this, since none of the torque or reliance on that is based off of the actual shell. These also fit into an AeroPress, whereas the K2 does not. So that's another kind of thing that I think is fantastic, is if you're traveling with an AeroPress, this fits in there. Anyway, before we kind of move on to the final taste test, I do want to quickly kind of compare these to the Q2 heptagonal, which has been my favorite kind of tiny travel grinder for a long time. Even though the K6 is a fantastic grinder at the same price as this one, I tend to prefer this because how small it is. It is a full aluminum body, so you don't have to worry about plastic. You have kind of like some silicone or something here that gives you a nice grip. For these, there is no built-in grip, but they do send, these little silicone bands, which I use. I just think they look ugly for the review. But I do recommend using these for these cheaper ones. Makes grinding much easier. This one has a built-in one, which looks kind of like wood. It's nice for the aesthetic, nice to hold. Then we have the body of this one. Remember, counterclockwise, so you can twist this off. In the same way, the aluminum body is not doing anything to the actual grind consistency or the actual torque going on. It's an aluminum body, and this one's quite light, 32 grams. As you can see, the thread pitch on the Q2 is much more fine than on the Q Air, but the thread pitch, this is just screwing into the body itself. So that doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the grinding. Very similar. Actually, the lines are slightly off on the diagonal angle, but we can take off the washer up here, which would expose a bearing, and a washer on the bottom, which exposes that second bearing. So the same two bearing solution. Then we can take off this bottom with the wing nut, those two nice stainless steel kind of balls that are right there on the bottom. We take off the plate, which again is a very thick plate. And this one may be even thicker. Let's take a look. Yeah, this one's 4.22. This one's even thicker than the Q Air. And I showed this in my P2. You can see it. There's a little wiggle room, and since torque is being transferred through that axle, if there's wiggle room, it's going to want to bend and warp part of this area. And so, due to the fact it's not perfect tolerances, you need thicker metal, like here. With this, because the tolerances are not perfect, even if there's a little wiggle, it's such thick metal, it's not going to bend with the amount of torque you're applying. So I think that's a really nice addition there. We have our burr. Then we can take out our axle, our spring, and our other washer. And there we have it. I do find I prefer the cups out of my Q2 heptagonal than my Q Air slightly, and it could be due to the fact that the pre-braking is different. So it seems like there is a longer final crushing section, but there's less of them and they're shorter. So it spends less time in the pre-braking section and more time in the crushing section there at the end. And then compared to this, obviously, yes, it still has less pre-breakers, because the P2 was very similar to the Q2 Air. So this has different pre-breakers, but when we look at the actual burr itself, the biggest difference is here, is the Q2 heptagonal has a taller burr, which again, it probably explains why there's a longer pre-breaking path. It's 20 millimeters tall versus 18 millimeters tall on the Q Air versus 18 millimeters tall on the P2. So the Q2 also has a longer burr path, which also is going to explain some of the better brews that's coming from it. In the end, this one is much more difficult to assert is worth an extra 30 or 40 bucks over the Q Air, worth an extra 70 bucks over the Kingrinder P2, especially when the K6 exists, which is an even bigger, like larger burrs, metal construction, external click adjustment grinder. Now, something to note, because I kind of forgot earlier, is that due to the Kingrinder P2 being slightly wider, ergo it can't fit in an AeroPress, it does have a slightly higher capability of holding coffee beans, so you can fill it with up to 23, 24 grams, depending on the bean size, whereas the Q2 is more like 15 to 19, maybe 20 grams with some coffees. I'll be using water to do a 15 to 250 ratio on each brew, doing the same exact recipe. I also wanted to note, while I was grinding it, the easiest to grind with was, of course, the Q2 heptagonal. Had a better feel in hand, felt a little bit more in control of the grinding itself. The second, but it was very close, was the Q Air. The most difficult was the Kingrinder, and honestly, you can kind of feel that the torque is going against the body of that plastic. It feels just a bit more difficult to get really nice cuts into the beans, even though I use the same grind size, same coffee for all three. It was noticeably a bit more difficult. That being said, it still was fairly easy with filter coffee. But anyway, let's get brewing. You might ask why I don't do more blind tastings and videos. We're going to do one here, but it's hard for me to explain just how unhelpful blind tastings are, because there are so many ways you can dial in a coffee. For instance, right now, you could do it based off of grind size. You could do it based off of same TDS, same extraction yield. You could do it based the best off of each grinder, but all of those have their own pitfalls. Maybe on the same TDS, one of them will outperform the other because it just does better at that TDS because of the way the particle size distribution is. Or if you dial into a certain extraction yield, some grinders can do better at higher extraction yields, others do better at lower extraction yields. You do it to what is your best, well, that's subjective as mess. Maybe you have an unconscious bias that you want one to perform worse than the other, and you don't dial it in to where it's as good as it could be. Just enough. Oh, thank God. This one, the Q Air, drained in 240, the P2 in 303, and then the Q2 at 243. So the Qs were very similar. And if we look at the beds, it's very clear that they are also the cleanest beds. The Q Air being the second cleanest, the Q2 definitely having the cleanest bed as far as fines in the walls and not as much mud. And then the most muddy was the P2. Although all three of these have had a similar amount of seasoning, there does seem to be a higher fines production on the P2. Does that mean it's terrible? No, it does not. Even if this bed looks muddier than your J-Max, this will likely have a higher clarity capability due to the other particles that are in the coffee. Fines don't dictate your brew. They can affect your brew, they can aid your brew. They don't dictate it, okay? Anyway, let's do some blind tasting. You have to be aligned with the taste you're watching or believe in what they say or, you know, at least vibe with it to an extent. Okay. All right, well, I've got bowls set here. Nothing for air because air is nothing, right? There's already a P on this one, so I won't defile another cup. So that's for the P2. Then Q2 I wrote for the Q2. So let's get these poured and do a little taste. If there are things I've done in the past where I've recommended something that you vibed with, or I have done, you know, created something you vibed with, or have done a recipe, whatever it might be, then, you know, you should just be able to trust that I'm not lying. Anyone can lie in a blind tasting on camera. And so I can tell you, I've already told you that across the board, my favorite is the Q2 heptagonal, then slightly after is the Q Air, and then the P2. They're all fantastic though. But anyway, let's get Ugo on here to actually taste these, and I'm going to switch them up. Ugo, turn around. Actually, come over here so they see you. I'm going to turn around. I want you to turn around. Ugo's going to taste these, and again, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just what does he prefer. And again, even if he prefers the K2 doesn't mean it's better. He prefers the Q2 doesn't mean it's better. But for you all, he's going to describe what he tastes. Ugo, I do have a question before you go. what are your thoughts on blind cuppings? Because it's hard for me to say, as the creator who does these, and people are always like, do more blind cuppings. What's your individual kind of thoughts on it?
Lance, blind tasting on camera is pointless unless you have at least n equals 50. What can be concluded from one coffee, one dial in, one brew? Remember, P less than 0.05.
Ooh, I could have said that better myself. Now let's get you tasting.
This one was the first one, so.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to decide already?
Yeah, so just describe them.
A little bit more complexity on this one.
Okay.
So I think I prefer this one.
Okay.
More juicy.
Ooh.
This one, I think between these two, those were a little bit more flat than this one, but this one has a little bit more body. So this one is the one that I don't like. This one, it's the one that I prefer.
Preferred? Oh, look at that, the P2. See? Like I said, muddy body don't mean anything sometimes. More body was the Q Air, and the one he did not like was the Q2. All right, nice. Just remember, guys, I'm the Lance Hedrick. Someone made me this spoon, so it's not arrogant. Right off the bat, that's way complex. That's my second, that's my third, but let me taste one more time. That's definitely third. Switching. So I would say this one is probably the most bang of acidity, most juicy and complex. That is the P. This time it was P. Second was the Q Air, and the worst was the Q2. You see, this is why blind tasting doesn't mean that much. I was trying to make these as even as possible because the burrs are so similar. Now I could go finer or coarser. I could do a different ratio to kind of appease those burrs. But what I did this time was same grind size on all. P2 bed was a lot more muddy, had more fines, took longer drawdown, but was most juicy, complex, and the least flat, which is the opposite of what you would typically think. So anyway, in the end, are the taste differences between these massive enough? For me, what seems the most worth it is the Q Air. It has the same aluminum construction on the interior as the Q2, and the fact that it's lighter, the fact that the body does not affect at all the grind distribution or the construction in general, and you could always 3D print another body. I say that this is the best bang for your buck on the table. I love the P2, it's fantastic, but when we're looking objectively at build quality, it is the worst of the three. There's no arguing that. There simply isn't arguing that. If you are really on a shoestring budget and you really need to save money, there's no reason not to get the P2. It is going to give you the best coffee you can get before you're willing to spend money for like a Time More 078, genuinely. I don't think there's any big jump between this and like an 078, not big enough to justify multiple hundreds when you're on a shoestring budget. If you have a Kingrinder, and this, if anything, hopefully me demonstrating this on camera and Kingrinder sees it, maybe they will offer an upgraded thicker option or a lesser tolerance, like less big tolerance option so that you don't get those warps and it can be a more consistent grinder. That's the thing with the Q is it could be a daily grinder. The P cannot. The plate's fitting, but the wing nut's not. I just like the wing nut better when it's a big circle. I was just curious. Now, I don't know if you can get as coarse with this. And it definitely doesn't give you the clicks, the steps as well, because it's not built for this base, but it does fit. Just quickly see how coarse we can get with it. And then we'll end the review. So sorry. Put the little handle on. All right, so this is about as coarse as I felt comfortable going before it got too loose. And that is coarser than you'll ever need So it does work. Look at that. We got that thick plate from Espresso on there, the 3.5 millimeter plate, and that's going to last a lot longer. You could probably use it as a daily grinder, though I would still worry about the connection to the plastic body. It still should ideally be for occasional use, whereas the Q-Air and definitely the Q2 could be daily. Actually, they both can, because it's the same internal construction. So anyway, that's it. Sorry for prolonging the review longer than it needed to be, but I wanted to get really into the nitty-gritty because it's so exciting to be able to do a review of genuinely top-tier grinders, meaning in cup, especially for light roast enthusiasts, at such a cheap and accessible price. It's time that we get more of this stuff. I'm so stoked about it. I hope you feel the stoke. I hope you feel the passion. Let's continue on with this. Thank you so much, and hope you brew something tasty today. Cheers.